If not, go to reactions. There's a way of doing it. I can't remember what it is.
Okay, Theo, what I'll do.
Under chat, it says captions. I go to chat then.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it doesn't. Video. Just press the video up sign. It's on one of them. Where is it? I've found out to be your background now.
I don't want you to do that.
No, but you've been struggling with that 2 weeks ago.
Okay, I think we'll just crack on. I do know, people, I'm really sorry that it does come up on the replay. What I will do is I'll send Theo a link. I'll make him co-host and I'll let him have a look as well. Is that all right?
No, because you'll have to do it on yours.
I'll make a co-host.
1 minute.
Okay, let's carry on.
Sorry, I just caused chaos.
No, it's all right. If we could have done it, I would have done it, but I don't know how to. So I'm sorry, person who asked that question. And I'm sure that many of you would have benefited from that. And next time round, I'll make sure that we do it in
It has got rid of the 2 red lines, though.
Yay! Right. Go on, Flossie. I'll see you in a bit. Send you a link. Okay, so as I was saying, the illustrations that you see this evening are illustrations that were done by Theo. These are my dungarees. Okay, so a little bit of background for you on us. When Theo was 14, he started to have difficulties with attending school, and you'll hear me refer to school attendance and barriers to attendance quite a bit because it's where a lot of our lived experience is from, but it's actually a very common experience for parents and carers of autistic children. So you'll hear me share some tips around that this evening, but also more broadly about living and caring in a neurodivergent household. He went from being a child who appeared to be fine in school, we know now that he wasn't, to not being able to attend at all over a period of about 6 weeks. And what followed was a period of almost 2.5 years when he didn't attend school at all. We did finally get him into a pupil referral unit, and he had a year of education otherwise than at school, which was a bespoke package of education, which was funded through a personal budget and an EHCP. Hello. He is now back in a mainstream college setting with a package of support, and he's my little tech buddy, aren't you? He's going to work out how to put the subtitles on. I can tell.
It's you've got press more. You've got like it's not looking like normal Zoom. I don't understand why.
Okay, we'll sort it out.
What's annotation then?
That's not it.
Don't worry about it. I've just looked up the instructions. You'd actually have to go into Zoom on the website
the way of doing it
and turn it on. But I've just found the instructions to say,
I'm really sorry.
On certain packages, you can turn on show captions.
Right.
That's how you're watching it.
Sorry, everyone. Oh my gosh. And my ADHD brain now is so distracted. Anyway, let's crack on. Thanks, Theo. Okay. All right, so I'm going to share with you 10 top tips tonight for surviving. And what is really important, I think, is that we recognise that as parents and carers in neurodivergent households, we have to do things a little differently, which, you know, involves things like working from our kitchen where our child ratches in the fridge in the background, even though you thought they were going to stay in the bath for at least an hour. You shut the door, please. So you have to find ways of doing things differently. Because what is really vital is that some of the things that people suggest that you should do, and lots of people have opinions on how you should run your household, how you should parent, how you should approach education, will not be in the best interest of you, your family, or your child. Like, for example, oh, it doesn't matter. So the first thing is that I want to really encourage you to trust your gut. Now, it sounds really obvious, but actually, if you're a neurodivergent person, being able to do that can be quite challenging, because as neurodivergent people, and also not allistic people, but also particularly neurodivergent people, it can be really difficult when you've spent your whole life being told that you're too much, too sensitive, too aggressive, too noisy, too quiet, too boisterous, too shy, too whatever, to actually trust that you know what you need and want and feel. And we get so good at masking that it can become really difficult to actually hear what that spidey sense is telling you. However, neurodivergent people, I believe, and particularly autistic people, we do have that kind of sixth sense for being able to pick up on things. You know, we have that kind of inbuilt inherent sense of energy and that kind of spidey sense around things where we do see and feel red flags quite quickly in situations. And the fact that we've been masking for so long, or we've been encouraged to mask for so long, means that we don't always know how to tune into that. So one of the things that I really encourage people on my programs, and I encourage you, is to start to lean into that trusting your gut. It will serve you well. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the other top tips. Okay. The second tip is listen to your child. I know that sounds super obvious, but when you're in the middle of, particularly if you're in crisis, so if things are tricky, if maybe you've got a child who can't attend school or college, or maybe you've got a young person who's in mental health crisis, or maybe you as a family are finding things particularly challenging, it can be really difficult to tune into what your child is communicating to you. And that won't always be verbal or spoken communication. There is a common phrase that's kind of like batted about within special educational needs communities, which is that behavior is communication. Now, what I would add to that is that somewhere in the region of 60% of autistic people also have apraxia, which means that they are not in regular and full control of their bodily movements all the time. That can be anything from, perhaps stimming right through to, having no control over their physical body a lot of the time. So behavior can be and is communication, but not always. Sometimes our bodies are just doing things in an unruly manner. But what I would say to you is that behavior absolutely can be communication. And even if your child is not able to tell you what is wrong, the way that they are reacting, the number of episodes of distress, the amount of stimming they're doing, the amount of sleep they need, the amount of time when they're dysregulated, the amount of sensory seeking that they're doing, all of those things, they are communicating to you that their central nervous system is perhaps not as regulated as it could be or needs to be to help them manage. So it's really key that you tune into the clues that your child is giving you, whether they are actually spoken word or whether they are non-verbal cues about how they're managing. So for example, for us and for lots of families like us, one of the things I see often with children and young people who have barriers to attendance is that they'll be saying that, the school or the college will be saying to you, but, they're fine in school. They appear fine. They find it difficult to get in, but once they're in, they're absolutely fine. And even the child or young person might be saying to you, I do want to go to school. I do want to be in school. What we're missing is perhaps that the actions around that, like the behavior, and I hate that word, but the way that their distress is presenting itself is telling you something different. And I feel like this was the case for us. For too long, I ignored those clues that were coming from my child, which started off as, headaches, feeling nauseous, feeling tired, not being able to get up in the morning, and graduated all the way through being a bit distressed and reluctant, right through to full-blown panic attacks and meltdowns at the idea of getting his uniform on in quite a short space of time. So it's really vital that as a parent of a neurodivergent child that you take the time and effort to get to know what your child's cues are and to get to know what your child is communicating to you, even if it isn't verbal communication. And it can be verbal, but it isn't always. Okay. Number 3 is get informed. There is nothing more informed than a parent of a neurodivergent child who's trying to work out what's going on for their family. But I always say to parents, when you first, and this is particularly for people who are new to diagnosis or new to realizing that their children or young person might be neurodivergent, or indeed that they might be, when you're first kind of plunged into that world, I think many of us do what I did naively and think, oh, well, now that we know that there's something going on for my child or young person, now that we know that they are autistic, ADHD, PDA, dyspraxic, dyslexic, dyscalculic, whatever it might be, now that we know they have a mental health challenge, now that we know that they have a barrier to attendance, now that we know that they're experiencing emotional-based school avoidance, whatever it might be, the help will be there. And I think I naively, and I know that this is a shared experience of many parents, incorrectly assumed that when we were identified as a family of a child who had additional needs, that the help would flood towards us. And that just didn't happen. And that was really hard to deal with. And there's lots of reasons for that, and we won't get into it in too much detail, but a lot of it comes down to money and lack of resources. What I do say to parents is that when you know this about your child or your young person or your family unit, it's helpful and useful information And if you are waiting for someone to come and give you a one-stop shop lesson in what your life is going to need to be like for the rest of your life, you'll be waiting a good long while. So it's important to find those places where you can get reliable information. There are a few places that I always point people to. So in England, I always point people to IPSI. IPSI have really good help, advice and support, particularly around special educational needs and disabilities law, SEN code of practice, DFE guidance, that kind of thing. I also always point people to Send Family Instincts. They're an organisation that I work with quite closely. I have a partnership programme with them. We have a programme called EOTAS Instincts, which is a programme specifically for parents and carers of children and young people who are going through the process of trying to secure education otherwise and at school through the Education Healthcare Plan programme or Education Healthcare Plan scheme. Don't worry if none of these words make sense. Don't worry, we will see you right. I also point people to my group, and when I send out the replay, I'll give you a link for that. So I have a group on Facebook. We have pushing on for 10,000 families in that group now, all of whom have children or young people who are neurodivergent or suspected neurodivergent, or who have barriers to attendance, and who are all kind of finding their way around the system. The other places that I assign those people to is, regardless of where you are in the world, I always suggest that you go and find Christy Forbes. That's Kristy Forbes. She's based in Australia. She is an autistic ADHD PDA adult. She's a parent of 4 neurodivergent children. And she runs an incredible program called the In Tune Families program. It's an amazing program, which really helps you start to think about what it looks like to be a healthy neurodivergent family. And there are some amazing, amazing books out at the minute. I've mentioned mine already. I don't know if I mentioned I've written a book, but this I am recommending to anybody and everybody that is in the UK. It's called Square Pegs: Inclusivity, Compassion and Fitting In, a Guide for Schools. Now, it's actually a guide for professionals, but what isn't in here about issues around inclusion and barriers to attendance for the UK is not worth knowing. So I am recommending that parents go and get that book. There's also a brand new book out by Eliza Fricker called Can't Not Won't, which I'm just waiting for my copy to arrive. So if you do go on Amazon and if you go to my book, Your Child Is Not Broken, you'll see other recommended titles. There we go. Eleanor's waving the book. She's got her copy already. You'll see recommended and associated titles, many of which are written by people within the autistic space, many of them autistic adults themselves. And I firmly believe that the best place to learn about autism and ADHD and other neurodivergencies is from those adults who have grown up with those neurotypes and who have grown into adulthood. What else is she waving? Equipping Send Children for Life by Joe McMeekin, also an excellent book. I'll make sure that I put a reading list with the replay for you. What I would also say to you is that local knowledge is worth its weight in gold. So there are many Facebook groups for where you can connect with other families in your local area. So there are things like in England, there's the local SENDIAS service, Special Educational Needs and Independent Advice Service. They are an independent and impartial service, but they are all part funded by your local authority. So some people find that a little bit tricky. I'm not going to make any judgment there. I would just say that not all SENDIAS workers are created equal. If you're in Wakefield, ask for Val. I can't tell you who else to ask for elsewhere in the country. But the local SENDIAS service is helpful just in terms of connecting you to what is happening locally and knowing what facilities, capacity, activities, groups is happening at a local level. They're usually really keyed up on that. And the other thing that is worth seeking out in your local area, and again, I feel this is more for connecting with other parents as much as the information that is given, but again, some people find them very helpful, is your local parent carer forum. And if you Google that, you'll find them. You'll almost certainly find them on the local offer page of your local authority as well. For me, the best advice and information has always come through from parents who have been through what I'm going through at any one time. I just don't believe that there's anyone better equipped to tell you what to expect, to hear you, to hold space for you, to validate you, and to give you really good, reliable advice than other parents who have experienced the system. And that's not to say that there aren't some incredible advocates who are not themselves parents. I'm looking at you, Eleanor Died. But there are, for me, it's worth its weight in gold. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit more in terms of finding your community and finding your people. So that's number 3, get informed. Get yourself some information, get yourself tooled up. Okay. My button's not working again. Here we go. Number 4 is make your voice heard. Now, this can be really tricky, especially when you are finding that you are swimming against the tide. So what I do recommend and what I do really encourage you to do is to start thinking about what you need to do to be able to advocate for your child or young person. And with your child and young person, because anyone who has a child who's a, you know, sort of like a well-engaged 8, 9, 10 and upwards year old, it's good practice for them to be able to safely learn their skills of self-advocacy. As we bring children and young people into adulthood as neurodivergent adults, having the skills they need to self-advocate or to be able to get their needs met are the skills that will equip them for life far better than any bullshit social skills training that anyone wants to throw at you, or any parenting course that anyone wants to throw at you, or for heaven's sake, any behavioral approaches. So what I do recommend that you do is that you think about, when you're going into any situation and you're trying to advocate for your child or young person, think about, first and foremost, is it appropriate to take my child or young person with me? It's not always, and it can be very difficult for young people to be hearing themselves spoken about in a deficit-based way all the time. But when you can and do have the opportunity for them to learn those self-advocacy skills in a safe way, I would absolutely encourage you to do that. What I would also say is that be ready to have people tell you that you can't have things and that things are not appropriate for you, and be ready to use the question why a lot. Okay, so I have kind of gained confidence in this area because of my skills and experience, I guess. But for example, when I first started out, and if you've read the book, I wrote a book, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned that. If you read the book, you'll know that I talk about the Senko at our first school, who told me that we would never get any HCP for Theo. She told me that there was nothing wrong with him. There isn't anything wrong with him. He just happens to be autistic, but that's by the by. She said there was nothing wrong with him. He was fine in school. I wouldn't get any HCP for him. And if I did, I should come back and do her job. In a really not at all passive aggressive way. When we got the EHCP, I sent her a copy of the EHCP and my CV. Because I'm that petty. But what I would say is that she was wrong. She was absolutely wrong. And it was only me saying, I'm not sure that's right. Can you explain why that is? You know, and really using my own voice and leaning into that got me the answers that I needed. And we'll talk about that in one of the upcoming tips. But what I would say to you is it can be very difficult to make your voice heard, especially when you're in a trauma response. And then it is important to understand, and there's lots of really amazing trauma-informed training for parents, understanding the effect that this process can have on you, particularly if you're battling the EHCP system in the UK. But actually just trying to advocate for a disabled child, especially when you yourself are a disabled adult, can be really traumatizing and really triggering and really difficult. And in those situations, neurodivergent people especially find it difficult to speak up for ourselves. So it's about putting things in place so that you can make sure that your voice is heard. That might be that you have someone else speak with and for you. It could be that you just take Doris from 2 doors down to sit in the meeting and eyeball the Senko and make them feel a little bit uncomfortable so you don't feel outnumbered, and anything in between those. So it's about working out what works best for you, but really prioritizing that you need to make sure that your wishes, wants, questions are being heard and are being responded to. Sometimes that might even mean that you're not using spoken word to do that. It might be that in an effort to make sure your voice is heard, you want to do everything in writing. We'll talk about that again in a little bit more detail. Okay, point 5 is gone. Trust no one. And this is with a little bit of a caveat, right? But yeah, trust no one. Just referring back to, if I had listened to all of the inaccurate, uneducated, ableist, gaslighty bullshit advice I've been given by professionals, I probably would not be here today. And I don't say that lightly. And I mentioned in the book, I don't know if I mentioned, I've written a book, that, you know, this drove me to a very dark place, where I did think about ending my own life. And a big part of that was that the people who I thought I could trust, i.e. the professionals, the people who were paid to help me and my family, turned out not to be trustworthy. And when I say trustworthy, I don't mean that they're malicious people necessarily. There's a couple of them, they move around quite a bit. But as a general rule, people who work in the field of special educational needs, they're not out to hurt us. It's not necessarily personal. And the system is stacked against us. So there is such a huge amount of professional gaslighting and systematic ableism in the system that basically means that we are fighting from the very get-go. I would encourage you to be very careful about whose advice you take. I would encourage you to be discerning about whose advice you take. I would encourage you to get really good at filtering out the bullshit. And I would encourage you to get really good at finding reliable people who you can check information with. There are lots of places, then it will be different for everyone. But for example, in our Facebook group, we often have parents that come in and say, a caseworker, a SENCO, a head teacher, whoever has said this to me, is that right? And in the comments, you'll get parents saying, no, that's not right. And here's the piece of legislation that shows you that that's not right. It's those places that you need to make sure that you have people you can trust. And it also goes as far as in terms of, and again, you'll get some well-meaning friends and family members who have opinions, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. It doesn't mean you have to listen to it. The great things about opinions is that everyone's got them, and the crap thing about opinions is that everybody's got them. So, you are allowed to let unsolicited, unhelpful, crappy advice wash over you. And you're allowed to decide who are in your circle of trust, and you're allowed to set strong boundaries with people who are not in your circle of trust. When we talk a little bit about the Unstoppable Parent Program, I'll talk to you a little bit about how we do that. Okay. Next one. Whoa. Give yourself permission to say no. This can be tricky. When I was a trauma-informed coach, before I did work specifically with parents and families, I used to run a course. It was called How to Tell People to Get Stuffed. And basically, it was for people who were not very good at saying no. And it was one of the things that people came to me and said more than anything else. I put other people first all the time. I'm not very good at maintaining boundaries. I'm not very good at holding my own field. I'm not very good at saying no to people. What do I do? It's a learned skill. And it's something that takes practice, and particularly for neurodivergent people who have been raised to be people pleasers, not to draw attention to ourselves, not to stand out, to try and fit in. It can be incredibly difficult to say no. But saying no doesn't just mean shouting no, sod off in people's faces. It also means things like deciding how you want to communicate. So most people that work with me know that I don't take unsolicited phone calls, and my voice note message on my phone says I don't take unsolicited phone calls. My anxiety means that right now I'm staring at the phone waiting for you to leave a voicemail. I'll listen to it and I'll email you afterwards. So it depends on how honest you want to be about that. But if you find phone calls difficult, then don't take phone calls. If you find communicating by email difficult, then instead use another method. If you prefer face-to-face meetings, always ask for face-to-face meetings. If you prefer a Zoom meeting when you can have your camera off, do that. So it's about setting those boundaries. And one of the things that we cover in the Unstoppable Parent Program is that no is a complete sentence. So you can absolutely, and this takes practice as well, practice being in the habit of just saying, no, thank you, I won't be doing that, without having to explain yourself. You will save yourself a lot of time and energy and effort. So giving yourself permission to say no is probably one of the best skills you can learn as a neurodivergent parent. Okay, we're into Theo's illustration. Stuff gets juicy from now. So number 7 is put on your own oxygen mask, which I know is a bit trite and it's a bit of a cliche, but for parents in neurodivergent households, it's absolutely key. This illustration is one of Theo's of a child and an adult, and the adult hasn't put their oxygen mask on. When I first saw this picture, I thought the blue was a beard, but he explained to me, no, they're turning blue. So some of his illustrations are pretty dark. But it makes me laugh, especially because the kid's got the little smiley face on their t-shirt. And I think sometimes as a parent, when you're trying to advocate for your child and you're working quite hard to protect them from everything that's going on, you're like on the floor gasping for breath. But it is really important that you find ways to fill up your cup, practice self-care, whatever you want to call that. I'm not under any illusion that for any of us or many of us, that will be spa days. It bloody won't be. If you're lucky, it'll be having a poo with the bathroom door shut. So let's be honest about that. And there are other ways that you can put your own oxygen mask on first. So that might be making sure that you have time for some fresh air every day. It might be making sure you eat breakfast. It might be assuming breakfast is the thing you do. Like, no judgment here. We don't really do breakfast. It might be that you have a commitment to yourself to have a phone call with a friend every so often. It might be that you give yourself permission to stay up and play Mario Kart. It might be that, you know, on a Thursday night you watch Love Island, whatever it might be. I don't know. Apparently people do that. But it's working out what you need to keep your reserves topped up. For some people that's exercise, for some people that's sleep, for some people that's, I don't know, getting intimate with yourself. I don't know what it is, but whatever it might be, find things that fill up your cup, and commit yourself to doing the things that you need to stay healthy and well as much as is possible whilst you are going through this process. And you know, Amber, who's on with me tonight, and myself are living proof, and there are many other parents in this situation, that even when you try really hard, that is not always possible. You know, I'm now diagnosed with a chronic fatigue disorder, and that is almost certainly down to the fact that it took 4 years of fighting like a demon to get what my son was entitled to. And the level of self-care that I practiced during that kept us on the right side of things going absolutely horribly pear-shaped. So find ways to take care of yourself, whatever that looks like. Okay, and it is different for everyone. Number 8 is prioritize. In our house, we prioritize blankets, Yorkshire tea, and teddy bears, but it might be different for you. So one example of this is, I think this is a really helpful example actually, is that in our group on Facebook, we'll quite often have a chat that'll be like, oh, it's Friday, who's had their 4:30 Friday afternoon email? And it seems to be that those of us who are in the EHCP process are fairly used to receiving an email at 4:30 on Friday afternoon, just before caseworkers go home and clear their inbox for the weekend. And they press send at 4:30 and bugger off home. And we open an email at 4:45. And it ruins our weekend. What I would say to you is that regardless of your circumstances or situation, regardless of how old your child or children are, regardless of whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, prioritize your mental health and the well-being of your household above anything else. Anything else. You are allowed to say no to anything that does not fulfill that criteria. And that includes leaving emails that arrive on a Friday afternoon to be unanswered or unopened until Monday morning, or even Wednesday morning if you want. Give you an idea of this. So for a good while, I don't do one-to-one tribunal work at the moment, but for a good while I was managing 10 different tribunals for individual families. It brought me to my knees, and it was a baptism of fire, but I had a period when I was looking after 10 different cases. Which might not sound like very much when you think that caseworkers, some of them have 200 cases, but it's very difficult when you're a parent of a child who's been through the process, and when you're someone who feels things as keenly and as deeply as I do, and as many other autistic people do. And what I had to do during that process was prioritize according to how close we were to deadlines for different things for those families, how in crisis those individual families were, and what the knock-on effect of dealing with those individual queries were for me and my family at any one time. So if I've learned anything during this process, it's that whenever I'm faced with any option, question, challenge, email, request, whatever it might be, my first question to myself is this in our best interest? Is this going to be a danger to my mental health or my child's mental health? And if that's like, if those criteria aren't fulfilled, there's a very good chance I'll say no. And that will include not opening emails until after the weekend. You will do yourself no favors by falling into the trap that many of us do of opening an email as soon as it comes and then like getting into a right state and a panic about it, which I understand. And many of us cannot leave emails unopened. But I would just encourage you and empower you to be like, okay, I've read that email. I'm going to file that under wait until chuffing Monday, you gits, and I'm going to go out and do whatever I need to do, or go in, stay in with my kids all weekend. For many of us, going out would be a lovely thing to think about, and that's just not an option at the moment. So just prioritize your well-being and your mental health and your child's well-being and mental health. above all else. This is linked to that. Take your time with things. So again, if you're looking at EHCPs, for example, when you get a draft EHCP, you're given a minimum of 2 weeks to look at that EHCP and to give feedback to your local authority. That's a minimum of 2 weeks. If you need more time, you can have more time. Just request more time. The thing that I think that people don't know about the process is that although, like, for example, when you're in appeal, when you're in a tribunal for an EHCP, there are legal timeframes. And don't get me wrong, I hold local authorities to them all the time. And I bend them myself as a parent. I have a chronic fatigue condition. I have a disabled child at home. If I miss a deadline, I send an email saying, I've not been very well. I'm sorry I've missed this deadline. Here's what you asked for. Please, as a reasonable adjustment, accept my apologies and understand that no intention of offence is intended. And, here's what you asked for. One of the families that I worked quite closely with, and someone who, the parent of whom I absolutely adore, and the kid is this incredible PDA, just an incredible, incredible child. And I remember that they used to say, the kid used to say all the time, they'd adopted it from one of their key workers that they were working with. And the kid used to say, we've got all the time in the world. And I just love hearing their little voice in my head saying, we've got all the time in the world. I mean, it's not strictly true, but also time isn't real. So, if you need to take a bit longer to do something, take a bit longer to do something. If you need to just ignore something and never deal with it, that's okay too. There may be consequences. But, you do have that option. And there is that thing about picking your battles and deciding what serves you best. But do take your time over things, especially if you get an email and it sets your brain on fire and makes you want to reply, telling people what a bunch of gits you think they are. Take your time before you press send on that email. My advice with emails is always start a new thread and don't put their email address in the box until you've checked the email and you're happy with it. Then put their email address in the box and then send it. And you won't accidentally send them an email where you tell them that you think they're a fucker because you haven't proofed it properly. Sorry, first F-bomb. That's not bad. We've got to number 9. Okay. So take your time. You've got all the time in the world. And I know it's a cliche, but people do say kids grow up so quickly, and they do. And especially, for example, if you've got a child in crisis, if you've got a child who's not able to attend school, when you're 9 years old, a week out of school is a long time. And if you're trying to advocate for your child in amongst that, going back to the thing about prioritizing, it won't be possible for you to sit and spend hours and hours and hours without checking on your child, without at least going and making sure that they're still in the house, so do just cut yourself a bit of slack. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And to my knowledge, no child has ever woken up all of a sudden not autistic anymore. So you have got time to work this out. Prioritize your well-being, prioritize their mental health, and take as long as it needs. Things can and do wait. And actually, although there are statutory timescales for things, all those statutory timescales are on the local authority, not on you as parents. Okay. Upskill yourself. So this is really important. I think when you are a parent of a neurodivergent child, you have to be so many things. Not only are you a parent and a taxi driver and all the things that regular parents are, you're also administrator, filer, researcher, writer of snotty emails, receiver of snotty emails, sifting through of legal information. There's a lot of things that are expected of us because the system is so stuffed against us that as parents, we do have to do that extra legwork. Now, you don't have to, you can opt out of it, it's fine. But if you're in someone like me, who I just have such a massive sense of this isn't okay around what was going on for us as a family, and I chose to engage in the process, and I chose to do what I needed to do to get my son what he was legally entitled to. Now, what I would say is that I also know there are families who choose to opt out, and I think that's completely valid. I know families who have opted to electively home educate, and it's absolutely been the right decision for them. So it's about what's right for you and your family, and it's about what you and your young person need and want. But if you are going to fight the system, or if you are going to engage with any kind of system, you're going to need probably more information than you have right now. There are so many places that you can learn things. There are, you know, the likes of IPSI that I've already mentioned, SEN Family Instincts. There's some incredible webinars online. There's always really good free training available to parents and carers. There's also really good low-cost training available to parents and carers. Some parents go and do like level 3 IPSI training because they want to get themselves like really clued up on what's going on within the SEN space and within the SEN law space. Whatever it is that you need to do, I would just empower you to be open to what you need to learn, delegate where you can't manage, and be ready to have an experience that will change the way your brain works for better or for worse. And you have control over that to a degree. So it is about finding the places where you can get good information and getting a good balance of that, because I think a lot of us, I would probably wager that the majority of people on this webinar, this is not your first webinar. This is not your first rodeo. You've probably consumed a lot of information from various advocates, autistic people, you know, trainers, educators, whatever it might be. Take what you need, use the skills that you learn, and what doesn't feel useful, feel free to park. And that goes for anything that I put out as well. You know, like the information and the things I'm sharing with you are pretty generic and they might not all fit you. You need to work out what you need for you and your family and grab onto that, upskill yourself where in the areas that you need to. And if you don't have the skills, find someone who does. There are some amazing advocacy services. There are some really good and very affordable, even low cost and free advocacy services. Doesn't have to cost you a fortune. There are places where, you know, for example, in our group on Facebook, people will sometimes be like, I need to send an email that says this. And quite often a parent in the comments will be, put this. And then you just copy and paste it and stick it in an email and press send. Make sure you've taken out the bit where you tell them that you think they're a git. You know, so decide where your skill set has holes and work out how you're going to fill that. Because unfortunately, this is the life of a SEN parent. And I don't want to be one of those like, I'm not an autism mum, I hope. God, I hope not. I haven't been on Mumsnet in years. But I do want to be honest about the fact that the parent in a neurodivergent household, you need a different skill set to parents in neurotypical households. You just do. It's just the way it is. And that's not because our children are any different. It's not because our children are broken. It's because the world is not built for us. And we have to find ways to do things differently. Giving you a bonus ball. I was giving you 10 tips tonight. My bonus ball, my absolute, if I could give one thing to you tonight that I think will really stand you in good stead, it's this: find your people. It is so isolating being a parent of a neurodivergent child or young person when you're trying to navigate your way around a system that is not built for you, when you're trying to find out as much as you can about what might be going on for your child or young person, when you're trying to advocate for them, when you're trying to care for them, when you're trying to care for yourself, when you're trying to prioritize, when you're trying to not tell people to get stuffed all the time. You know, well, you are trying to tell them to get stuffed, but you're not allowed to say get stuffed, so you have to learn how to say no. But it's so isolating. And you know, one of the things that I've had as feedback from the book is that people have said, you know, the whole point of the book was that I didn't want people to feel like they were the only ones. And I've had hundreds and hundreds of messages from people saying, I genuinely thought I was the only person experiencing this. By finding a place where you can be with other people who have shared experiences with you, you will, what's the word? You'll gird your loins. Is that a word? Gild? You'll strengthen your undercarriage. That's what I'm going with. And I wrote about
word is good, Heidi.
Is it good? Gird your loins.
Because girds were a form of trousers that hold everything in place in medieval times.
Gird your loins. Okay. But strengthen your undercarriage means the same thing, right, Eleanor?
Yes.
Thanks.
Because that's what it did with cloth.
I wrote about it in the book and I just wanted to read it to you because I spent a bit more time thinking about this when I wrote it, and rather than just me rambling about my 10 top tips, and I just thought it would be helpful to you. So it goes like this. It says, One of the main reasons for writing this book was that I could let other parents know that they are not alone. For a long time, I thought our family was the only family experiencing life as we were. Interactions like the ones we had with just ignorant Jenny were commonplace. You'll have to read the book for the context of that. However, once I discovered that there were mainly online spaces where parents like me were sharing their experiences, supporting one another, and having the conversations I desperately needed to have, it was like a whole new world opened up to me. For me, finding an online community of kindred souls was like finding a door to a secret garden. But rather than being populated with wildflowers and luscious plants, this garden was rich with neurodivergence affirming parents who were determined to see their children as individuals, not stereotypes. The garden was a glorious maze of self-discovery where I found a community of like-minded parents who, like me, swung between stumbling about in the shrubbery of self-doubt to skipping through fields of validation. What we all had in common was a heartfelt commitment to doing the work required to see and support our children as individuals. Together, we challenged our preconceptions about neurodivergence. Collectively, we pushed back and rebelled against those ableist stereotypes that had stood between us and the truth that our children were gloriously neurodivergent. I am much more comfortable in online spaces than face-to-face environments. So initially, I joined multiple Facebook groups in a bid to find a place where I felt at home. Some groups were not for me. Others very quickly felt like a pair of very comfy slippers, a place to be me without fear of judgment. Some of the people I've connected with in those spaces have become dear and trusted friends, and they are the people I've come to know I can rely on where times are especially tough. Finding your people can be life-affirming, life-changing, and life-saving. Having people at the other end of a Facebook message cut through the loneliness that had overwhelmed me for most of my adult life. You deserve to have people in your life who will hold space for you to show up as your authentic, messy, sad, lonely, confused, and overwhelmed self. So I really want to encourage you that if you haven't got spaces like that now, that you seek those out. If you want to come and find out if our Facebook group is a place like that for you, you're more than welcome to come and find us there. Equally, I'm not precious about it. There are plenty of places that might suit you better. I will put, when I send out the replay, I will put in some links to some good places. One place I haven't mentioned that's a great community is the Not Fine in School community, and also the New Bold Hope community. They're both great places to hang out if you're a parent who is parenting a neurodivergent children. I want to know what Stella Harris is eating. It looks delicious. Is it chocolate, Stella? What is it? Is it a Milky Bar? A Milky Way? Oh, a dairy milk caramel. Oh, you chuffer. Oh, made me want chocolate. Thank you for that, Stella. Okay. So what I want to do is just share with you a little bit about what we've got that we offer, that we have to offer at the moment. So a little bit of background for you. When I first started doing this work and I built the Facebook community, and it is a free community and anyone can join at any time, and we do check you on the way in and we do kind of wheedle out people who are professionals. We have a separate professionals community. Was that there were lots of conversations happening about things like, how do I tell people to get stuffed? How do I practice good self-care? What does that look like? You know, I really need to be in and around people who will just hold space for me while I work out what our priorities are. So I had before ran a program called the Unstoppables program. It wasn't for parents and carers. It was for, actually it was for professionals when I worked previously in the professional space, but I reworked the program and turned it into a not parenting course. And it's called the Unstoppable Parent Program. And we cover all of these things in that program. So we cover what it looks like to trust your gut, to listen to your child, to get informed, to make your voice heard, what it means to not trust people and to trust people, how to tell people to get stuffed, how to put on your own oxygen mask, how to prioritize your time, energy, and effort, how to take your time over things and give yourself a little bit more downtime so your brain doesn't feel like it's on fire all the time, and how to upskill yourself. And we also do that in a place, and we do it in an online community, and we also give you an online library where you will hopefully find some of your people. So with your permission, I'm going to show you that what the Unstoppable Parent Program looks like and involves. Doors are open now and we start next Thursday, so you've got a week. It ran last in June, so it's running now, and it will run in March. It's a 5-week program. And then we may run it again before the summer, but it won't run again in the autumn. So because we've got something else coming in the autumn. So if this sounds like something you want to engage with further, the Unstoppable Parent Program is one of the ways that you can work with me. So what we do is we run a 5-week program, and the strap line, look at that, air quotes, what a wanker. The strap line is the guilt, ditch the shame, pour compassion on your brain. Snappy, right? So what we do is a 5-week course. It's trauma-informed, neurodiversity affirming training and community for parents and carers who don't want to lose their shit. So we have a Facebook community that I host. It's a closed Facebook group only for members of the Unstoppable Parent Program. We do a live training every Thursday night. You have access to that on a replay. Probably about half of the cohort join us live, and lots of people join on replay. And each week we tackle a different area. So we look at things like your internal critic. We look at things like regulating your nervous system. We look at things like setting boundaries. So it's not an EHCP course. It's a course around equipping you with understanding how and why your brain does some of the things that it does when it's in survival mode, or when you are triggered, or you're in trauma response. So with those 5 weeks of training, you get a DIY worksheet with each session. We have special guests every week as well. And I run the program with Kate Jones. Kate Jones is a neurodivergent psychotherapist. She's also Chief Communications Officer at Neuroclastic, if you're familiar with Neuroclastic. She has over 10 years experience of supporting children and young people. She was a supervisor at Childline for many years. She's a freaking genius, and she's one of my very favorite people on earth. And she runs the course with me. We also give you access to the course content via your own password protected online library. So you come into Unstoppable Parent, you have the Facebook community if you want to engage in that way. There's no expectation. We're not the boss of you. You do what you like. We're all grown-ups. And you can come on the Zoom on a Thursday night and have the training delivered live. You can have your camera on, your camera off. You can do it in your bed. Some people come and just listen to us and fall asleep. That's totally fine. Just remember to, not slip a nipple. That's basically the number one rule. That's the only rule. No nipples. We don't do nipples. Oh my God, my brain sometimes says the most inappropriate things. I'm so sorry. And then you can access the course content in your own time as well. So the day after, you get a replay link, and you are then able to access it in your own time. There is a workbook to go along with it. Some people ignore the workbooks. That's totally fine. Some people, I don't know, add extra sheets and do their own homework. It's entirely up to you. Oh, button. This is what it's for. It gives you an understanding of why your brain does what it does, and it gives you permission to know that that's okay. So this thing that a lot of us do as parents, I think, when you are in a position where you're trying to advocate for your children, is we can sometimes get into this kind of cycle of shame where we give ourselves a hard time about the way that we're responding to things. And we do a lot of that. Why do I do this? What's wrong with me? What we do in Unstoppable Parent is we reassure you and show you and do a little bit of science around there's nothing wrong with you. What's going on for you is completely normal and natural. Given the circumstances, the situation, your neurotype, your response in the moment right now is completely understandable. And here's how to be a bit kinder to yourself about it. We'll give you some tools and practical techniques to help you self-soothe when you need to calm your brain down a bit. We will teach you, if you want to, how to breathe, but we like to assume that most adults know how to breathe. So we take a different angle on that one. Like, I'll show you how to breathe if you really want me to. I could do that for you now. But Kate, who delivers the training with me, does a lot of work on calming your vagus nerve. So there are some particular physical exercises that you can do to calm your central nervous system. And if you remember to breathe at the same time, that's brilliant too. We don't do yoga or meditation. That's not our thing. We can signpost you to those things, but we're not really hommers. We're more kind of people. You will get better at setting boundaries, pushing back when you need to, and not giving yourself such a hard time. You'll get a certificate. Those people who did Unstoppable Parent last time are still waiting for theirs, but I promise this time you will get one. Because apparently that's a big selling point, and I should have got on with sending them out. You'll also get, wait for it, an Unstoppable Parent notebook. Again, the last cohort are still waiting for theirs. And just in evidence for that, let me show you something.
We're not finally going to get them, are we, Heidi?
Here's a stack of envelopes with Unstoppable Parent notebooks ready to go in the post. They are ready. I just now need labels on them. It's a bit of a standing joke that my PDA has kicked in so hard now that the Unstoppable parents might have to come to my house and get their notebooks. But we have a plan this time round whereby Jodie, who organises my life, will be in charge of shipping Unstoppable Parent notebooks. So you will get one this time. And you'll also get to be part of the Unstoppable Parent community. So it's a closed Facebook group. And the first time around, the cohort, we've kept the group open, and we'll do that for you again. And the cohort use that group and support each other. And it's an amazing, amazing community, really a supportive space. So this is how much it costs. As they say in Yorkshire, how much? You can do a one-off payment of 150 quid, or you can do 2 installments of 90 quid. You can do 3 installments of 60 if you want to. That gives you full access to the Unstoppable Parent Programme, 5 weeks of live training and additional content. We also give you free access to a webinar that I did with Kate. Theo, can we let the dog out? Called Surviving the Trauma of Broken Systems. It's a 2-hour webinar that I did with Kate Jones. We also put everyone in a draw to win a support call with me and Kate, and you will get your Unstoppable Parent notebook, probably before the last cohort get theirs. Although it's now getting not even funny. So we start on the 2nd of March. If you would like to join, you can just go to the website and click on the Unstoppable Parent link. So if you click on the top, it says for parents, the drop down, it tells you how to sign up. You'll get a welcome email, and the Facebook group will be open over the weekend. What's up? Okay, you're just loitering. Yeah.
Whether he's loitering with intent.
I will make you tea in a minute. Do you want to fill the kettle? Okay. So yeah, if you would like to join, we'd love to have you. I think we've currently got 30. We normally cap it out. I think last time round we had about 70. I shouldn't think we'll take more than 100 this time round. So if you would like to join us, we'd love to have you.
You need to buy it.
Listen to him. You need to buy it. Why is that, Theo? Is that because you want some Lego? He's
just about to say that's to pay for his Lego.
He says you have to buy it.
He seems to think the only reason I do any work is just to pay for
Even
Lego.
Bert, he says he knows that he wants you to buy it. He gets to buy it.
Out the way.
It's deep in the water.
Mate, I'm just
Yeah.
busy, sweetie. I won't be long. All right.
Okay.
He's getting bored. So I'm not going to take questions specifically on anything EHCP or whatever. We'll link you in the group for the group in that. I think probably looking at the chat, it's been fairly busy, and Eleanor might have been answering questions because you just can't stop her. But if anyone had any questions, thank you.
I
Yes.
thought that was my job.
It is your job. If anyone had any questions specifically about the Unstoppable Parent Programme,
There was one
take
that
them
wasn't
now.
about Unstoppable Parent, but it was asked by about 10 people.
Okay.
When you were talking about trauma responses and how as a parent you can go through trauma response, the request is, can you put a list when you do your other lists of anything that is really good for trauma response? I do have to admit, I tend to send to New Bold Hope, your book, obviously.
Yeah, so basically when
Someone
we're
wrote a book, in case you didn't know.
I did write a book. I don't know if I mentioned that because Sharon doing a fake yawn. Yeah, so when we're talking about trauma responses, we're talking about what is commonly thought of as fight, flight and freeze response. But actually, Dr. Stephen Porges, he's expanded that to include a fawn phase where you fake wellness and a flop phase where you shut down. And we do talk about that. I do talk about that in the book, and we do cover it in some detail in Unstoppable Parent. But yeah, there's loads of stuff online about trauma responses. Dr. Stephen Porges is excellent. As you said, New Bold Hope is excellent.
Naomi Fisher's worth following.
Naomi Fisher's work is incredible. But yeah, I will do some signposting when I send out the link for some good places to learn about trauma-informed parenting. There's also the trauma-informed social worker. She's an excellent resource. Raising a Wild Child. Susan Isa, I'll make sure she goes on the list as well.
And Studio 3.
Studio 3, who offer low cost and free low arousal training. And Suzanne, can't remember her name, booked on one of her webinars yesterday. Let me see if I can find it. She's running a trauma-informed parenting webinar, and it's free. So I signed up because I love a free thing, me. Let me see if I can find it. But I'll put it in the link if I can't find it. someone recommended it to me yesterday. I want to say she's the trauma-informed educator.
Parent, isn't it? Tip.
Parenting. Thank you. Trauma-informed parenting. Thank you, Amber. It's a good job you're here because I've got shit for brains. Yeah, loads of comments with people are saying Jodie Smitten resources. Yeah, excellent resources. There was another question. Someone was asking about how long. Suzanne Scott, that's it. Thank you, Banzi. Someone else was asking how long do you have access to the online library for? Until either YouTube dies, I die, or my web server dies. I mean, I might even set it up so that it's maybe I'll leave a legacy and then you can just all have it until you all die. That's a nice thought, isn't there?
That's
So,
such a cheerful thought.
Basically forever until something goes wrong with the tech or the world explodes.
That's all right. If I put them all onto my server, at least we've got a backup.
Yeah, Eleanor has a server where everything in the world exists so that when the cockroaches take over the earth, we'll still be able to watch Schitt's Creek. So
And Monty Python.
Monty Python. Yeah.
It's very much mine and my husband's taste.
And all 15 series of Face Off, which we've been consuming.
Oh, he said actually, where you like Face Off, the other one, I've forgotten the name of it. I'll have to ask him again. And someone said, are you an SEN solicitor? No, I'm definitely not a solicitor. I don't solicit in any way whatsoever.
Eleanor is
I've got a
law graduate with
I've got a law degree,
yeah,
but
with extensive
I'm a
experience in
teacher in Senko and I've been in the business for 25 years.
Emily, thanks so much for this. I'm going to try and get booked on the course, booked onto another webinar, so I better go now. How many parents on this webinar are on back-to-back learnings 6 nights a week? Like the University of Special Educational Needs Law. Yeah. Were there any other questions, Amber, Eleanor, about?
That was the only one I got that a few people asked. Everything else I've just answered.
Yeah.
Where I can.
There was only one about asking about Welsh law and whether
the South Wales, yeah.
And I think it was in reference to the Unstoppables programme, but Unstoppables is not a law.
No, Unstoppables is not an EHCP training program. Unstoppables is I don't even know, like, okay, when I used to run it before I knew I was neurodivergent and I ran it for neurotypical people who were in business, it was a mindset program for entrepreneurs. And so basically I reworked it and turned it into something much more useful, in my opinion.
Oh, there you go. They're all going off to the school refusal webinar.
Oh, yes. Good call. Very good call. Well, I will let you go and do that, peoples. I hope that some of you will join us for Unstoppable Parent. If not, it's been lovely to spend some time with you tonight. And if you're not already on our mailing list, then you will get an email asking you if you would like to join the mailing list. And I do send a weekly, sometimes fortnightly because ADHD, email with an update on things. And can someone tell me where that school refusal webinar is? Someone's asking in the comments. Does anyone remember?
I don't know if Emma Morant's still on here. If she is, it was her.
I saw it earlier on today. I think it is a Sunshine one. Yeah.
I think it's the Sunshine Support one.
So thanks everyone for joining. Sharon was multitasking. That's all right, Sharon. I don't mind. I'm used to you kind of ignoring me. Diana Hackney, that's the best face I've ever seen in my life. You do that when you're thinking as well. So do I. So yeah, it was nice to see some of you tonight. It was nice to see the rest of you. It was nice to see your names on screen. And thanks for joining me. And I will get this replay out to you in the next 24 hours. That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to commit to that now. And Jodie will get it out to you. Say unstoppable. What, to me? Well, I don't know what that means. Also, I'm very distracted now. So thank you very much for joining me. Have a lovely, just have an evening. I'm not going to tell you to have a lovely evening. That's probably a big ask for some of us. Have an evening. Have an evening. Go to bed when you can. Get some rest and have a day tomorrow. And I will see you all soon. Take care, everyone. Good night. Take care. Bye.
Bye.